So a few days ago, my friend contacted me about a property that he said wasn't too far from Caacupé, only a couple of kilometres away. But this morning when he picked me up to come and have a look at it, he said, "Oh, I think we better bring the four-wheel drive." And at the time I thought, oh, he's just trying to skimp on driving his own car because of the petrol. But coming here, I can understand why he thought that maybe the surf might be the best option, because this place that we've just travelled to, it's only a couple of kilometres from Caacupé, but man, it was definitely a cross-country hike to get here. And as I was coming, I was thinking, why on earth would we want to have a look at a property that's up such a goat track as this? And the surf got here no problem, but you definitely want a four-wheel drive. But having arrived here, I've quickly come to realise why he was interested in showing me this property, because it is one of the most magnificent views I've seen here in Paraguay. It's an absolutely stunning position. So definitely not a property for everyone, but if someone was looking for an amazing vista and a property that had these kind of quite rare features, then I think this place would be really up somebody's alley. But just to give you a bit of an idea of where we're standing, if you look through over there, I don't know if the little camera will pick it up, but you can see way off into the distance Asuncion, which is a pretty remarkable feat given how far away we are here in just the outskirts of Caacupé. And then panning around, that view is just spectacular. And I think just over those trees there, you could probably get a real proper view of Caacupé if you wanted it. Of the night time, it would be stunning. Really gorgeous outlook. And then the other interesting thing about it, which could really be desirable to a lot of people, is that cerro at the back there is actually part of the property up to the ridgeline, I understand. So the property has that natural feature, perhaps providing some extra level of security, because it would be very difficult for someone to come over that. And the goat track that we came to have a look at the property in itself was a bit of a deterrent in terms of people coming up here. The one thing that catches my eye is that tower up there. It's actually some distance off and it's on the adjoining property. It's only a radio tower, they tell me. Doesn't look like it's got any of the other interesting things on it. But whenever you're on a high point in Paraguay, because it doesn't have an abundance of such high points, you're going to often see, you know, towers and such things. So it's pretty hard to have such a spectacular view without either having a tower or having the risk of having a tower somewhere around. You can see off in the distance there's a couple of towers on that cerro over there. Basically, wherever you look across the horizon, you can see towers on points that perhaps are high points or whatever. So, but for the most part, they're non-interesting device towers, but you know, they can always change. Welcome to the 21st century digital age, but at least for the time being, that tower over there is, as I understand, just a radio tower. But man, if someone wanted a spectacular view, this is about 20 hectares of beautiful land, very undulating, quite hilly and stony, which is quite interesting. Provides, you know, a nice sort of interesting landscape. Be interesting to build on. I mean, stone is solid, so you're not going to slip away, but you're going to have to be mindful about things such as driving wells or foundations or whatever. In such stony ground, you've always got to be a bit mindful that it's not always easy to get through it, but you know, provide some really solid building platforms if that was what you were intending to do. And there's some beautiful spots to build on this property. And just as I'm speaking now, that breeze is coming up from down the hill, and it's just sweeping up here, and it's just so beautiful. Really nice and breezy up here. You can probably hear it. I haven't got the earmuff on my microphone, so it's probably given a bit of an indication of breeze there. But this is really beautiful. A lot of natural coconut trees there. They're the little coconuts. I just had one there. It's really nice, actually. You can see some of the fruit up there. They're just little, but they taste very similar. Because I understand they're from the coconut family. I don't know a lot about them, but you can do stuff with them. But it's very common on properties like this. And this property's been used mostly for grazing and also making charcoal. I'll show you the oven in a minute. It's quite cool. Apart from that, it's pretty much been left to its own. And the other good thing about somewhere like here, you wouldn't have any issues in regards to contamination from pesticides or any such thing. There's definitely been no monoculture up here, or no sort of intensive growing of any description, so it would be amongst the most pure property that you could possibly find. From that vantage point, it would be potentially excellent to grow some stuff up here, but you'd always be dealing with that rocky ground. You build up the soil, I guess. Many things you can do. You could build your own soil over time, heaps of cows and livestock, so there's plenty of material and resources that you could use to build a really viable permaculture operation if that was your bag. If you were the type of person that just wanted to go to town for once or twice a week, it wouldn't be a drama. You'd just get a four-wheel drive like mine. You're in town in about 15-20 minutes, and you could hang out here and have a beautiful life. And you don't have any passing traffic, which I like. Just got the old caretaker's shed there. I don't even know if he kind of hangs out here much. I don't know. But that's a real original. Perhaps in need of some renovation. But it does the job. Bit of debris and bric-a-brac around the place, but not a ton of plastic. It hasn't been used as a rubbish dump, at least what I can see. But you never know. One thing when you come onto any property here in Paraguay, you always got to really have a good scout around for hidden rubbish dumps. I sometimes pile the bits and pieces, so not always. They're pretty good. They are pretty good with it compared to a lot of countries that I've seen, but it's definitely something that you need to be diligent about when you're looking at a property. But man, you're not short of beautiful flat spots to build here. And if it were me, I would be utilising this bedrock and making foundations that would last longer than me anyway, and several generations. But this is something cool on the property that caught my eye. They're making carbon here, charcoal. So there's an abundance of dead trees and limbs that fall off. So they're not clearing the place. It's not sort of being cleared of the timber of any sort. That Cerro there has got tons of trees and sources of wood that can easily be repurposed into carbon, and cooking on charcoal is very common here. The sardos and grills. I went to one last night actually, it was beautiful. But they cook often on that sort of carbon grill. So this is a really beautifully constructed oven for carbon, massive. I'd love to see it fired up. I think that's really amazing dimensions. They've put a bit of time into it. You could definitely cook about 1,000 pizzas in there, maybe not 1,000, but quite a few. I'm not sure if it would be economical to fire it up just for a few pizzas. Oh, that's cool. I suppose if you had to, you could even sleep in here for the night if you're that desperate. Who knows? It's definitely well constructed. I guess I'm just small-minded, but I love stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty groovy. And so we're pretty much at the foot of that Cerro, and the caretaker tells me there's some nice tracks up there through the bush, so you can get your exercise for sure. And I bet you there's parts of that Cerro that few people have ever ventured into, so that's a really beautiful feature on a property. I think it just provides a nice backdrop if you build something. It's nice to know that you can't be built out. This property sort of runs down and alongside that Cerro, so there's just endless things that you could do with it. Now, one thing is the water issue. They don't have a well on this property, but like just about any place in this region, you could drive a well, and because it's got that slope, you could set your water situation up where it could be mostly gravity fed. So that would be something that you'd want to check out if ever you're looking at any property. I don't think you ever take it for granted that water's going to be there, even though I'm pretty certain that you'd be able to find a spot to drive a well here. You get a expert well service in to do an assessment just to verify that you're going to have sufficient water. It's generally not a problem. I love these ant hills. Now, these ants make this just with their dirt and saliva, as I understand, and they are amazing things. Pretty cool. Lots of bird life here too, which I like. And really dramatic rock formations. It's a really interesting property in that regard. It's not just kind of flat land sort of sloping down and not too much going on. It really is quite beautiful. A bit lost at the moment, wandering around, trying to get down to a spot the caretaker just took me to, and it's amazing. So this property sort of hugs along this zero, and then as you come down lower, it comes into this really beautiful sort of walking track, and you can sort of hug alongside the zero and the natural culvert down there that's been formed. This would be really cool to watch in the winter when it's really raining. That water would stream down there. It'd be quite beautiful. But definitely a really pristine property that, because of its location and its formation, it hasn't really seen much use except for cattle, or not much else, making a bit of carbon. But to the right person, this would be the sort of thing that would be an amazing place to set up and maybe develop something. You could put some properties on here if you were just wanting to get away from it all, but still be close to a town centre. As I say, pretty demanding short goat track into town, but I didn't even have to activate the four-wheel drive on the truck, but it gave it a bit of a workout. It's definitely not a two-wheel drive job, that's for sure, but there's a real benefit to being a bit out of town. And if you have a challenging route to your property, well, I guess the good news is that anyone else has to face the same prospect particularly. And those people who perhaps you don't want visiting, i.e. intruders, would think more than twice, because to come to a property like this just wouldn't be economical for most garden variety swipers. So although one thing provides a challenge, it can also provide a benefit. I can say with certainty that in this region at least, properties like this aren't very common at all. Not far from the town, but you could be in another dimension. You drive up here and you know you're going to be left alone with one of the most spectacular views in this department, without a doubt. They're asking 90 millioni per hectare, and I've been told there's 20 hectares, so you do the math on that. But that sort of price point for this property, it's difficult because there's not many properties that you can really compare this to. On one side, I would say that the route coming to it is to such a challenging extent that maybe that price needs to be considered and perhaps amended. But then I imagine if anyone was selling this to me, they may retort with the observation that you're not going to get a view like that anytime soon. And I guess that it also has a potential price point attached to it, depending on who you're talking to. So I can't really give too much of a definitive opinion in terms of price. I think if you are looking for a property like this, that price would be very acceptable. But if you weren't really that fussed about things such as views and relatively remote locations, then you could probably find properties not too much cheaper than that, but definitely on more easily accessible roads. So you lose one, you gain another, and life is often a trade-off when it comes to properties. But man, this is really special. And Paraguay isn't renowned for its high vantage point views. There are some locations. Altos, as the name implies, is a high point where you can get some really nice vistas, and there's many other areas where you can perhaps find a nice hill and have a nice view, but not so many where you're going to get that. So there you go. That's another property to add to the growing encyclopedia of life in Paraguay videos and offerings. As I've said earlier in other videos, is we just want people to get a bit of a realistic idea of property prices, because one of the very common things is that people can come into a place like Paraguay, and if they fall into certain hands, the prices can be just ludicrous. By watching a few of these videos and getting a few price points, at least you've got somewhere to start. Am I saying this is the cheapest that you'll find? No, not necessarily, because nobody can say that. There might be someone over the hill that's selling it for considerably cheaper, but probably not. The price point tends to be kind of around that kind of point, depending on where you're looking. Somewhere around the 100 millioni per hectare is sort of a point that I sort of try and stick my stake in terms of a starting point. Sometimes we see it wildly over that, and maybe the property has the features that justify that. And we also see it on the other end, but not hugely on the other end. And there's some silly price points that are being bantied around by some people who have never actually bought a property, never really looked at many apart from just driving past them and maybe calling someone. But as soon as you call someone and they identify that perhaps you may not be from this country, well, that price point can change considerably. So my hope is that we show properties that are kind of in the ballpark of what anyone would pay here. Generally, I think the price point for this property, I don't think if you came along and you were a local that you would get it much cheaper. But who knows? The world's a funny place. As I've said previously, Paraguay isn't necessarily a straightforward place to buy property. You can buy property here, and there is a pathway, but there's many other pathways too that you really don't want to go down. So let's just keep learning from each other, and we'll bring you more information about some developments in our own life and things that we're hearing from others. And if we bring it all together in time, we can create a better situation for people who want to move here and invest in property. And the end point ideal is to ensure that people come and buy good properties at good prices with surety of title and no concern that they're going to lose their deposit or even the whole sum. That's really not too much to ask, I don't think, and let's keep working towards it. But part of that, I'm certainly glad I've come out here. It gave the truck a good workout. I just got new tyres just a few days ago, so I'm pretty pleased about that. The tyres were interesting. They cost me just under 3.5 millioni to replace the 4 tyres on that. So, you know, I'm pretty happy with that. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care. Ciao.